Welcome to San Luis Obispo Repertory Theater's 78th season. We thank you for your support. Please note that photography of any kind is not permitted during the performance. Please take a moment now to silence all cell phones. This world premiere production of 17 Racoons, or It's a Really Long Story, would not have been possible without the generous support of several sponsors from our community. Please join me in thanking our show sponsor, Janice Fong Wolf, our Ubu artistic team sponsors, Pam and Mitch Nichter, and our Ubu season sponsor, Gina Kirk. Unforgettable characters, extraordinary stories, since 1947.
For crying out loud! No one gonna get that?
I would do that. There you go. Wanted to do that.
I'm not answering that. I can't answer that. Before cell phones and, caller ID, I developed a not so irrational fear of the phone. I mean, back then you either answered it or you didn't, and either way there were consequences. By the mid-90s, I was in my, 7th or 8th year of traveling the road as a stand-up comedian. It was an insane, exhilarating, but, kind of lonely way to make a living. I was in a different city every week, living in a crappy apartment that some of the clubs would provide, with two guys that either spent all day smoking pot or all night finding a waitress. And boy, they don't talk about that at career day. But the lifestyle appealed to my sense of laziness and my desire to sleep till noon. So I would try to have some discipline in my life. I would try to spend at least, an hour a day trying to write jokes in these notebooks. And there are dozens more of these. Oh yeah. I one time checked into a hotel with a guy. The man behind the counter said, "Do you have any reservations?" And I said, "Yeah, I think he's married." They never got that one before. This one's old. I was at Disneyland. I saw Tomorrowland. Oh, way too crowded. Totally filled with things I've been putting off. The gym. Yeah, that one used to kill. By 1995, I'd also become a regular on cruise ships. Paid really well, but boring. God, I only worked an hour a week. The rest of the time was spent chasing down scuba instructors, because that's the hot guys. Or following a cruise staff member. Well, where are you going? What are you doing? Can I go with you? I'll call bingo. Or just stay in the crew bar drinking with the other comics. One week, I worked with a comedy magician that spent his downtime doing tarot card readings for the crew. So, of course, I wanted one. That sounded fun. Who doesn't want to know their future? So he laid out 4 cards. He said, "Wow." I usually try to put a positive spin on all my readings, but I don't think I can. This is bad. This is awful. You're going to go through hell, and then hell's going to seem like a vacation. Sorry. Then he laid out one more card. He goes, well, you'll come out on the other side. You're going to be a different person, but you'll survive. Okay. Kind of hoping he was wrong. And right. I just tried to block the whole thing out. Because that was crazy, right? I can't even remember the guy's name. I moved on to a dive hotel in Las Vegas. A horrible room, but it paid well. I was the only female comic that ever worked that club. That was not a badge of honor. I pointed it out to the manager one time. I said, I don't see any other women comics on your roster. He said, oh, we don't work women. He said, oh, we'll work you, but we're not going to work women. Happy to report they imploded that hotel. But at the time, it was just another boring gig that paid well. And boring mainly because I don't gamble. So I would usually just lay around the hotel room, waiting for showtime. Shit. This one particular time, I started thinking, boy, something needs to change. I mean, I'm ready for my big break. You know, I had recently auditioned for The Tonight Show. It had gone well. I was waiting to hear. I had done a commercial. I had a hotshot manager in New York and an agent in Los Angeles that loved me. I mean, it was time, you know? I needed to stir some shit up. And I said, I am ready for something to happen. Here's a tip, never say that out loud. Say, I want a sitcom, I want a comedy special. Because at that exact, precise moment, something did happen. I heard my brother Jay slur the words, you gotta get home, Dad's had a stroke. Oh, God. Now, as hard as that was to hear, the thought of going home and having to deal with my brother was almost as debilitating. To say we were not close would be an understatement. We were both adopted, so we weren't blood siblings. Our only common bond was living under the same roof. I could get away with it when people said, hey, are you Jay's little sister? And I would say, no, I'm an only child. I mean, nothing about us was similar. He was tall, blonde, good looking. He was also mean, angry, a high school dropout, and a raging alcoholic by the time he was 16. By the time I was 16, I was an expert at avoiding him. And because I was not particularly strong or athletic, I developed a very harsh tongue and a stinging vocabulary. The only way I had to fight back. My parents never believed a word I said when I tried to tattle on him. I was 5 years old, and I remember my mother saying, would you stop saying those things about your brother? He loves you. He would never run over you with a go-kart. There were tire marks on my dress. So this trip home should be fun. That entire flight back to Dallas, all I could think about were those tarot cards. The gates of hell had just opened. I was at my father's desk. The piles of papers and envelopes just seemed endless. There were bills and past due bills and threatening letters and a lawsuit. I mean, why hadn't he opened any of this? I mean, why didn't he tell me about any of it? And why hasn't anything been paid? And where is all the money? I started to realize what might have caused the stroke. I thought I might join him. I found myself repeating a new family mantra, you know, something that was going to mark this occasion and I could later have cross-stitched into a sampler. What the fuck is this? And this, the pink envelope, probably the most disturbing discovery of all. It was from a video club. You know, this was before internet. You couldn't just go online and find a video. You had to send off for it in the mail. So, you know, I opened it and, oh my God. 3 pages, 3 columns each page, back and front, 9-point font. Porn. Well, this was not my dad. Never would I ever believe that he had in. I mean, is this some sort of scam on elderly men? Does the post office know about this kind of predatory mail? Because I will contact the postal commissioner. I will notify the feds, and I am sure, you know, I overreacted. But, Jesus, what was going on in that Jack built. In 1959, my dad bought 3 train carloads of bricks for $1 a carload. They came out of Chicago, from the building that was torn down due to the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. Some of you may not even remember what that is. You should Google it later, it was ugly. It has the word massacre in it. But for $1 a train carload, you don't care whose blood is on the bricks. At least my dad didn't. Once I learned about this, I used to just study those bricks looking for blood. It's probably why I still hate Valentine's Day. But when he built our house in 1960 of those bricks, it was a showplace. It was tasteful and elegant and architectural success. It was written up in a magazine and newspapers for some of the unique features of its time, you know. Things that were really cool on the surface, but look closely and no physician, heal thyself. We had a dumbwaiter that never worked, an indoor barbecue that never got a chimney, a backyard designed specifically for a pool that we never had because I'm sure they thought my brother would drown me in it. I never got them to admit that, but come on, they weren't completely oblivious. But oh, that magnificent house. It was 7,500 square feet, 3 stories, 5 bedrooms, 6.5 bathrooms, and now a total fixer. My dad only shuffled from the bedroom to the kitchen to his office. The rest had been left to ruin. Now it needed a plumber, an electrician, a roofer, a decorator. The style still reeked of the 70s and my mother's love of gold and teal and flocked wallpaper. My mother, she had died several years before this with cancer. It sucked. But she'd been the glue that held us together. I mean, after she left, we splintered. She never had an unkind word to say about anything. And you never wanted to upset her because she was just so nice. My mother loved to throw parties, she loved to dance, she loved to stand on her head. We don't know why. Because she could, I guess. In 7th grade, she went off to this formal dinner dance one night in this gorgeous, full-length, flowy chiffon gown that was draped like a Greek goddess. She came home later that night, a little bit tipsy, and shoved a wad of cash in my face. Said, "Look what I won." And I said, "For being the prettiest mommy at the party?" Because I'm such a suck-up. She said, "No. They bet me I wouldn't climb up on one of the dining tables and stand on my head." Easy money. And she waltzed off to bed. I didn't know whether to be horrified or proud. I idolized her. And she always had the best advice, you know. Of course, you know, never wear white after Labor Day. If it's not fun, stop doing it. And if you marry for money, you'll earn it. Once she was gone, it was sort of like the porch light had burned out and none of us knew how to put in a new bulb. Now there was just the 3 of us. On one side, my father, who loved me intensely, and on the other, my brother Jay, who hated me with just as much intensity. And now the one that loved me could barely speak and didn't know what day it was. I mean, this was a man I used to watch make an effort to be funny, because, you know, I was the funny one in the family, so, it gave him great joy if he could make me laugh. So, my first semester at college, I got really homesick. I called one day just to hear his voice. When he answered, I said, "Dad, how you doing?" He said, "That sounds like an incomplete sentence. Is that last word financially?" I know, I laughed so hard I hung up on him. But he had been there for me my entire life. He had supported me. He had always believed in me. So, yeah, I felt like it was up to me to stay and kind of, you know, make things right. So I would stay, you know, for 2 weeks. I'd get it all figured out, and, you know, then I'd get back to work. I heard them before I saw them. Laying in my tiny twin bed in my childhood bedroom, I heard it. Ungodly noises over my head. I imagined some guy with a hacksaw trying to get through the roof to come down and either kidnap me or murder me. I was kind of okay with either at the time. Pretty sure I just laid there all night long staring at the ceiling, waiting for the boogeyman. But at dawn, I knew I had to face it. The grand staircase in the foyer led up to a huge bedroom my grandmother used to live in. For some reason, my grandmother used to live with us all the time. Well, until I was about 7. I still remember being at the bottom of the stairs as I heard her loudly proclaim from the top, "I can't live another day in this house with these kids!" I remember thinking I would miss her as I ran and packed up a few things and flew past her shouting, "Dibs!" Got the whole top floor to myself. And there's a lock on the door. Score! But that day, as I climbed those beautiful white carpeted stairs, it was the smell that got me first. The landing over to my bedroom door had been transformed into what appeared to be the cat's litter box. And not just recently, for a while. See, my dad had arthritic knees and he didn't easily navigate stairs, so he just didn't. He had no idea those cats had been peeing on every inch of that landing, and I had no idea how I was going to fix it. Just going to add that to the there's no money for repairs list. But the noises, I had to find out what was trying to kill me. I walked over to the attic door and slowly opened it. There it was. Raccoons. Tons of beady little eyes just glaring at me. Families of raccoons looking at me like, what? Actually, the term is a nursery of raccoons, which is more fitting because they had moved all the insulation over and were building little beds in the crib. They gazed at me without flinching. That's another term they use, a gaze of raccoons, because of the way they will just stare you down waiting to see who will make the first move. Yeah, it was me. I made the first move. I closed the door. Note to self, call the Humane Society and borrow a trap. I could see then what my days were going to be like. I would be up at dawn, preparing meals, scheduling doctor's appointments, dealing with speech therapists, physical therapists, home health care workers, packing, cleaning the house, and trapping raccoons. 1, sometimes 2 a day. I mean, some hissing, some growling, some docile. I mean, each little masked bandit had its own personality. And it seemed like with each capture, they just grew in nastiness. Turns out my dad had been feeding the cats outside. So every day at dusk, a parade of raccoons is coming up the hill from behind the house. I'm not even sure the cats ever got fed. But it didn't take long to figure out how to trap the little bastards because they love cat food. I was taking them about 2 miles away down to a creek near my old elementary school and releasing them. I mean, it was time consuming, you know, it was tedious, and frankly, sometimes it was a little bit dangerous. And after about 3 weeks, I kind of had enough of it. I had enough to do. I had a lot more important things to do, so I finally stopped at 17 raccoons. You know what? Fuck it. Let the little trash pandas have the house. I didn't care. The suits. I was called to a meeting on the 27th floor of a downtown bank building by my dad's attorney. Thank God somebody seemed to know what was going on. I mean, I came armed with, you know, a pile of bills and some threatening letters, just looking for answers and explanations. I found myself at a conference table surrounded by suits. There was a tax attorney and a bankruptcy attorney and some real estate guy and a couple others that just blended into the leather chairs. And they tried to explain to me about the mess I was embarking on and how deep the mess went and what my options were, and there were few. I mean, bankruptcy was imminent. some assets would need to be liquidated, the house would need to be sold, some debts would have to be settled, and finally one guy said, look, I don't know how to say this tactfully, so I'm just gonna say it. You know, this would have been a lot easier if your father had actually died. And I said, okay, I'll talk to him. Wide eyes around the table. Relax, everybody. I'm kidding, I'm a comedian. It's a joke. But seriously, I might kill him. Ugh. Then they handed me this. An envelope containing a threatening notice that was way past due from the county property taxes.
No.
I was staring down at a bill of over $250,000 in penalties and interest alone. Dad had never opened it. Guess he figured it would be the last straw and bring on a stroke. So he ignored it, and the stroke came anyway. I'm sure he just thought, you know what, screw it, I'll be dead before they figure it out. But at least the tax attorney was on my side. He said that he believed the county clerk would settle pennies on the dollar because, you know, this was not my fault. My dad's condition and the fact that I was doing everything I could, you know, to make it right. So he was going to take care of it. He would handle it. Damn it. The tax attorney called. He said he'd been down to the county clerk's office, and he said, now keep in mind, there are over 1 million homeowners in this county. Over 1 million. I walked in and said, I want the property records for Turnbow, and the woman behind the counter said, Jack, we want every goddamn penny. Yeah, they weren't going to help us. Too bad GoFundMe didn't exist back then. So I was just going to have to keep selling things off. You know, I would have to file bankruptcy. I would have to, I don't know, rob a bank. Dad, what the hell have you done? I don't know. That was the answer to every question I asked after the stroke. I don't know. So I was just going to have to pay it. I mean, my father had always had a contentious relationship with money, you know, always robbing Peter to pay Paul, shuffling, dodging, and on more than one occasion had taken money from me. I mean, once it was the insurance money to fix a roof on a little house I owned in Texas. He collected the money, never fixed the roof. He owned a roofing business. He started the business to give my brother something to do and to keep him from drinking all day. Unsuccessfully, I might add. I think I could count on one hand how many roofs actually got put on, you know. And I had always stayed out of that business, and I had no intention of stepping into it this time. And I had plenty to do. I had to keep going. I had to, you know, dodge his collectors. I had to get the house ready to be sold. I had to keep shoving down my anger. I had to just keep moving, which is funny because that was my dad's advice all the time. He said, you know, keep going, can't hit a moving target. Yeah, well, I'm not so sure that's true because I was starting to take some hits. Of course, by then my brother was nowhere to be found unless he scoured the dive bars. Once he figured out that my dad was going to live and there was no money, he took off. Oh, but not before asking me if I thought he should be in an anger management class. And I said, I will pay for it. Then he put his fist into a filing cabinet, so I'm pretty sure that wasn't the right answer. Without my dad there to push him and, you know, guide him, he was just lost. He even admitted to me one time that he thought he'd be better off dead. And I said, well, don't do anything stupid because there's no money for your funeral. I didn't see him for a while after that. Why can't anybody around here take a joke? When I was a preteen, I don't know, 13, 14, I convinced my parents I should be driving. I made up stupid excuses, you know, oh, it was my friend, it's an emergency, they gotta be, you know, somewhere. And I know you get tired of hauling me around all the time, and, you know, besides, I already know how to drive. Or I would just sneak the car out later, convinced they didn't know I was doing it. But it was eye-opening to see how obvious that was and how naive and how transparent, because it was really obvious now that my dad was trying to get the car keys away from me. He would say, until the house gets sold, you can keep a car here and I'll hold on to the keys for you. Really, Dad? Is that how I sounded when I was trying to steal the car? Because you're not going anywhere, Strokey McStroke. Did not say that out loud. I mean, it was distressing for him to have his independence taken away but like that. I mean, by then I had put him into a semi-care facility, and I say semi-care because it sucked. It's all I could afford. And it's where his girlfriend lived. But he hated it there, and I didn't blame him. Now his driving days were over. I mean, when your only outings are ER visits and doctor's appointments, you'll try anything. I'll only use the car for emergencies. Nice try, Dad. I mean, he didn't want me to have to be his chauffeur or his lifeline or his community bus any more than I did, but all I could say was, I'll think about it. Oh, but he had doctor's appointments, lots of them. Oh, like the social calendar of a debutante. There always seemed to be some doctor we needed to see. One afternoon, I went to pick him up, and I found him and his girlfriend napping. Oh, he came to the door all rumpled and unprepared, and I just snapped. And I said, do you know what time it is? We're gonna be late. I mean, I scolded him like he was a toddler, because basically now that's what he was. Our roles had changed. I was the parent now, I was in charge, and it is not in my nature to nurture. I mean, there's a reason I never had kids. I always thought I'd be a terrible mother, and now I was validating that belief. Because I could not handle this child. This child who had been my hero, my idol, my funny confidant, and my financial backer, who'd now grown small and quiet and incontinent and maddening. This afternoon, as I was driving him to his appointment with his girlfriend in the back seat, just hissing and murmuring her confusion, and we weren't close either. She was in the middle stages of Alzheimer's, and usually she would just scream when I came into a room because she thought I was Satan. So she was probably right. But that day, I was trying to keep things light. So I jokingly said to my dad, I'm so sorry I had to interrupt your little orgy this afternoon. I said, oh, we don't do that anymore. I can't get a hard on. I almost wrecked the car. What? I think the part that bothered me the most was anymore. Note to self, no more jokes. I wasn't crazy about him living with his girlfriend. Of all the women my mother said he could date after she was gone, this wasn't one of them. See, my mother knew she was going to die. So after 49 years of marriage, she told my father and gave him permission that he could date after she was gone. And she made a list. By then, most of her friends had lost their husbands already. In fact, my dad used to call her the widow collector. So she knew who would be right for him and who wouldn't. And this woman, Millie, nowhere on that list. So of course, he gravitated right towards her. After my mother passed, Millie couldn't get a casserole to our door fast enough. And they quickly became inseparable. I finally one day put my parenting foot down. I said, look, you can do what you want, really. I don't care. You can have sex in the street, do whatever you want, but you are not marrying her. We have enough problems. I'm not taking on her problems too. And besides, why would she want to marry into our family? For the money? Joke's on her. No weddings. I'd become the mean mom. My house, my rules. I was determined to control a situation that I had absolutely no control over. Let's admit it, it's It's heartbreaking to watch your parents age and start to circle life's drain. Harder still is to watch their passions fade. My dad had been a chef by passion. Oh, he was a glorious cook. He loved good food and trying to copy recipes from renowned chefs. And he could talk his way into a 4-star kitchen. And he watched cooking shows like some men watch football. Growing up, that kitchen was the best room in the house. But now he had no ability to cook. His little apartment had a hot plate and a microwave. He was eating institutional meals he hated in a room full of really old people he also hated. I couldn't get him to participate in anything I thought sounded fun. I'm like, hey, tonight's bingo. Do you want to go down and no? Okay. Hey, it's movie night. How about we go down? No? Okay. Hey, you want to go in the kitchen and teach that guy a thing or two? No? I could just watch his will to live fade away. His wife had passed, his girlfriend had Alzheimer's, his son had abandoned him, his daughter's being a bitch. And by the way, why does this job always fall to the women in the family? Why is that? Oh, I know they say it's because we're more caring, we're more nurturing, we're more compassionate. I think it's because we're not taught to say no. I wanted to go back to work. I mentioned that to one of my mom's friends who pointed out, working in those bars, telling your little jokes, that's not a real job. Yeah, I'm just going to shove that little piece of anger right down here. What I wanted to say was, well, at least I'm qualified for that job because I am completely unfit for this one. And the pay sucks. What are you going to do? I had to get back to the house. I had to get it sold. Oh, let the phone calls begin. It was our insurance agent. I liked that guy. He was actually really helpful. We were on the phone one day trying to make a plan on how to get that roof repaired and new insulation put into the attic. When he said, oh, here they come. Oh. Apparently some developers were trying to build condos by the creek behind his office, which also happened to be near my old elementary school. He said, oh, there's a group of neighborhood women that are fighting these developers, and so they've taken up a cause. For some reason, we've become overrun with raccoons. He said they come down here every night and feed them. It's nuts. They feed the raccoons? Yeah, can you believe that nonsense? Yeah, I think that's American. What? Yeah, I think those are my raccoons. There are condos there now, but they tried. I'm just hoping my raccoons made it out alive. You know what this is, kids? It's an answering machine. It's how we communicated in the old days. After a long day, when you got home, your life depended on whether that little red light was blinking. The 2 weeks I was going to stay had turned into a year. I needed to get back to work. I needed money. And I don't care what that old biddy said, I used to have a job, a career, a name. I mean, things had settled down a little bit. My dad had a place to live and somebody to watch TV with. I mean, surely my brother could sober up and step up and just keep an eye on him for a week, maybe 2. Every club I called thought I had gotten out of the business. I left messages with club managers I'd known for years and nobody was calling me back. I mean, nobody would give me work. Oh, finally. I lucked into a week in Boise, Idaho. The manager was a friend, so I'd be headlining, so good money I desperately needed. Oh, I just just wanted to feel a brick wall at my back, hold a microphone, and hear drunk strangers laughing their ass off. Thank you, Boise! I had missed it so much. And my mojo came right back. It really is like riding a bike, you know. Riding a bike is something you know how to do, you know. I was sparring with hecklers, ripping with the staff, hanging with other comics. Oh, it was bliss. And then Saturday, after spending an afternoon walking around the local mall, which is pretty much what every comic did in every town they'd ever been in, I came back to get ready for the shows and realized I hadn't checked my messages in a couple of days. I had felt so free and happy, I just completely forgot. So I called home and I put in the code. Call me if you need anything. I am so sorry. I'm here if you need me. 12 messages on my machine, each one more somber than the next. And I thought, oh my God, this is it. I go away just for a couple of days and my father dies and I'm not there. I didn't know what to feel. Shock, grief, guilt. And yeah, I'll admit it, maybe a little relief that it was over, that it was finally over. I called the one person I thought that would give me the news in the most straightforward manner, Bear, family friend who had been instrumental in keeping me from jumping off a bridge the year before. Back when I was trying to figure out how to sell properties and everything, I called a tenant at one of my dad's warehouses. Apparently there was some bad blood and there was a lawsuit pending, so I called and I said, you know, my father's ill, I'm going to be stepping in and taking over, and I was hoping to resolve any issues that you might have had, and this guy went off on me. He started saying he wished my father was dead, I could die right alongside him, in fact he may come over and kill us both himself. And then he just spewed profanities for what seemed like forever, until I just finally hung up, and I thought, what happened between the two of them? I was shaking. I called Barry, and he said he would pay him a visit. Now, I forgot to mention that Barry was 6'5", 250, and had the personality of a rabid Rottweiler. He came back from that visit, and he just said, he won't bother you again. To this day, I have absolutely no idea what happened, but he never bothered me again, and he dropped the lawsuit. So, he was my most honest ally and a no bullshit influence on me growing up, so I called him first. He just said, oh, no, Jack's fine. It's Jack. He's dead. Well, don't sugarcoat it. So it wasn't over. It was just beginning. The story was that Jay had been thrown out of 2 bars that night and was headed across town to his girlfriend's house. Did I mention he was married? Yeah. He took a freeway off-ramp at maybe 80, maybe 90 miles an hour and rolled his truck down an embankment, and he was killed instantly. I was silent, stunned. And then surprisingly, I wept. And not for me, but for him. Because now he would never get his shit together. He would never sober up. And he would never be happy. And I knew I'd have to get back and clean up his mess. I called the club manager and I said, I need to leave immediately. I just found out my brother killed himself. And she very compassionately said, suck it up, you never liked him anyway, you had 3 shows tonight. I had to do 3 shows. She apparently also told everyone not to make eye contact with me because that night, no one would talk to me, not even the other comics. I left the next morning. That was the last road club I would ever work. wife, Nancy, couldn't cope with any of this, and she started to spiral, so I had to make the funeral arrangements and close down the roofing business. Barry stayed by my side while I did damage control. See, my dad had signed on as his legal guardian when he was a teenager because he was kind of a mess of a kid. Even one time just blowing a hole through his foot to see if he could feel it. He was drunk. It's Texas. But by then, he had turned it around with my dad's influence and was a doctor of psychology treating teenage boys, with no irony. So I wanted him by my side when we closed up the roofing business. And I use the term business lightly, because I mean, there was one job ending, and you know, there was no money, so my lack of accounting skills weren't really an issue. But as we were cleaning out a filing cabinet, we came across a blue velvet bag. And in it were some Polaroids of some strange woman, naked, and a lot of pictures of my brother's junk. I can't unsee that. You want to laugh, but it was disgusting. It just made me hurt for his wife. I mean, he cheated on her so many times. I don't know how she didn't know. Maybe she did. I don't know. Everybody else knew. Barry said, let's just toss the bag. Right as she walked in the door and... Oh, it was the client waiting on the roofing estimate. And I said, oh my God, thank God you called. I didn't know how to get in touch with you. And I needed to tell you what's been going on. And so I went on and explained the situation. And then she just suddenly burst into tears. I mean, wailing and sobbing. And I thought, oh, I don't think you're waiting on a roof, are you? No. And then she said, did you happen to find a blue velvet bag? Oh my God, it's a skank in the photos. And I exploded like a dropped soda can. I mean, I unleashed on this whore right in front of Nancy. I couldn't even stop myself. I just went, I swear to God, if you show your skank face at this funeral, you cheap-ass piece of garbage. And I slammed the phone down, and I looked at Nancy and I said, get away from us. Get away from this family. Find somebody that will treat you better. You don't deserve this. She walked away. And after my brother's funeral, I never saw her again. My brother's funeral wasn't all that eventful, other than the friendship I started with Matt, the funeral director. We hit it right off. He learned it was pretty easy to navigate funeral arrangements when he was dealing with someone who wasn't really grieving. He learned pretty quickly he didn't have to put on an act with me. He didn't have to speak in a whisper. He didn't have to leave tissue boxes out on the table. He liked me. I mentioned that my father had once bought 4 funeral plots for the family, and that he had also purchased 2 spots in a new mausoleum that was being built for the city's high rollers. Oh, good God, Dad wanted to be in a drawer. Do they know he don't roll high? So I just mentioned Jay could be buried in one of those plots that we had, and then Matt had to kindly inform me that we didn't really have those anymore because Dad had cashed it all in, and there were no more prepaid burial policies. And there was 2 plots still there, but I would have to pay for them. Of course I would. Oh. And then Matt handed me the whole tissue box so I could throw it. I think Jay's funeral was the only time I was grateful for my father's stroke, because he had no idea what was going on, only that Jay hadn't shown up for it. I didn't know what to say to him. I didn't know what to say to anybody. People kept asking me what happened. I don't know. I just know someone's prayers were answered. I just don't know if they were mine or his. Maybe we were both in a better place. The adjustment was going to take some time for me because I had spent my entire life blaming my brother for every injustice, every pain, every bad decision I had ever made. Now whose fault will it be? After the service, I just went over to my friend Lisa's house. We've been in each other's lives since we were infants. Our mothers had been best friends since middle school. So. Her mom was also gone by then, so we decided to honor and remember all of those that had gone before us. We would make cocktails. Of course we would. Apparently it's what we do. So, and after a while, Lisa said, well, I guess now is as good a time as any to tell you you just buried your brother in my plot. What? You couldn't have said, apparently my dad had sold those 4 plots to her parents. Oh my God, you didn't say anything. She's like, oh, it's fine, I'll just have to be cremated. She's like, are you laughing or crying? I am laughing. Oh my God. I just buried my brother next to your mom. Oh, she is going to be so pissed. It wasn't long before the real irony started to set in. Everything my brother supposedly owned was in my father's name. He left nothing for his wife. And the craziest thing was his insurance beneficiary was me. I mean, it wasn't a lot, but why'd he left me anything? He hated me. But everything else came back to Dad, including our 1964 and a half Mustang convertible. It looked exactly like this. It had been my mom's, but then my brother took it, but he never had the money to fix it up, so he left it rotting at a body shop. I went and got it. That car had been my nightmare. My mom used to make him drive me to school every morning. What she didn't know is his favorite game was to roll very slowly in front of the school and make me jump from a moving vehicle. The deal was, if I couldn't get out, I'd have to stay and spend the whole day with him. I always jumped. So I decided to use some of his money and fix up the Mustang. I mean, he'd always wanted it fixed up, so it was kind of a way for me to honor him, and a big fuck you at the same time. My car now! Yeah, petty? Yeah, probably. But now that all the money was coming back to Dad, it was enough to start digging him out of his tremendous debts. Because my brother died, he saved us. He had always thought he was worth more dead than alive, and sadly, he was right. It was around this time that I started to wonder how much more I could handle. It was kind of starting to crack around the edges a little bit. I mean, I was sleeping in an empty house, I was shuttling Dad over to his girlfriend's. By then she was in a memory care facility and apparently couldn't eat unless he was there, and it was off to another doctor's appointment, and the roofing business was done, and the house was on the market, and cleared of raccoons. But I had one last task. Cats. Rocky and Sandy. Rocky had been my cat years before, and Sandy was my mom's. They were both really, really old by then, and Rocky was completely blind. I'm sure they had to fight raccoons for food, but they both seemed to do remarkably well, and they were the 2 sweetest animals. But I just didn't know what to do with them. I mean, at their age, I could not take them to a shelter. I just couldn't. And I certainly couldn't take them back to Los Angeles. Nobody wanted them. I finally begged my friend Reba to just keep them in her garage until we could find a home for them. And don't freak out, her garage was really nice. So we gathered them up, and we spent hours teaching them how to get from food to a bed and then back to the food. And Sandy did pretty well once she figured out where the food was. But then something happened. I don't know. A door opened, and there was a noise, and it startled them, and they just took off. They just flew out that door. And I knew Rocky was gonna hit a wall, so I just ran out after him, and I went through the door and around the corner, and it was like they had vanished into thin air. I mean, I spent hours going around that house, the entire neighborhood, and they were just gone. Absolutely gone. There it was. The crack that opened. I was done. I just cratered. I had just spent a year and a half trying to hold everything and everyone together, and I couldn't even save 2 old cats. I had failed them. I had failed everybody. I just dropped down in that driveway and started to cry the ugly cry. After everything that had happened, those 2 cats are what broke me. I needed help. I needed to go back to California. I needed a therapist. As I laid in that driveway just bawling, I remember just screaming, how could any of this possibly get any worse? Yeah, here's a tip, never say that out loud. You ever think when 2 rabbits rub up next to each other, one of them thinks, ooh, you're soft. There was a time when I owned a gorgeous fur coat. I know I'm an asshole. But I bought it at a time I was having some success in my career, and I don't know, felt successful. Could have worn the coat in Texas. They love assholes. But it was back in my little condo rental in California. I flew back there while the estate sale was going on at the house. You know, by then, everything I had left was in that little condo. Just some clothes, some garage sale furniture, and enough kitchen stuff to make a sandwich. And a fur coat. I got in late that evening, and there was a rare misty rain falling, even if that song tells you it never happens in Southern California. I could see the courtyard outside my door, and there on the patio was everything I owned in the rain. Without telling me, the landlord had decided to have the place painted, and they put everything outside and just left it. Everything was ruined. I just didn't have any fight left in me. I just have to start over. I moved the next day with just a pile of wet clothes. I mean, what did my dad say? Keep going. Can't hit a moving target. Pretty sure the target was on my back. Because see, once you've said something to the universe, like, how could any of this possibly get any worse? The universe says, oh, well, how about this? Or maybe this. I started to bleed. I mean, seriously bleed. To the point of severe anemia. I ran around scrambling to find a doctor, because what comedian has a doctor? A friend finally got me into her doctor, who wasn't even taking new patients, but this guy was amazing. He was at Cedars-Sinai, and he looked exactly like Captain Kangaroo. He said a simple procedure would fix me in the office. It's just a matter of scraping out my uterus. Is that too much information? Yeah, okay. I thought it sounded great. Besides, I was pretty sure that's where I've been storing all my rage. Other than that, wasn't really using it. So, and as a bonus, I found out he's the guy that had invented this procedure. So, yeah. And then he very delicately said, now, you know, afterwards, you will not be able to have children. Yay! All right. I'm 40. That ship has sailed. Besides, I just spent a year and a half learning how horrible I would have been as a parent. So, roto me, baby. What? It was a captain. He wanted to see me the very next day. That's never good, is it? Oh, he sat me down and said the biopsies came back and my uterus was riddled with disease. I have cancer. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just said, of course I have cancer. Look at the way I'm living. Man, just when you think you've hit bottom, you find out the bottom's got a basement. He scheduled my surgery for the next Tuesday. Now, here's a little piece of advice for you. If you go through something traumatic, like this, you should make sure you have friends other than comedians. Not a nurturing group of people. I mean, at the time, I couldn't even say it out loud. I called my best friend and I said, my doctor used the C word. She said, your gynecologist called you a cunt? Pretty sure he should have used a medical term. Check his references. But that's when I knew what I was going to have to do. I think it might have been the hardest thing I had to do. I asked for help. I think that was harder than the surgery for me. I reached out to friends, and I asked for their support. And I had 2 friends from different parts of the country both recommend the same exact book. You Can Heal Your Life by Louise Hay. So, what have I got to lose? Went out and got a copy. This copy. And then my friend that had found me the doctor said she wanted me to meet someone else, a woman named Esada, a healer. Why not? I took my book and an open mind. Esada lived in Montecito, just a couple of blocks from the beach, and she was young and blonde and beautiful and not at all weird or but when she walked into the room, my entire body just filled with electricity. I mean, I literally shivered. And she just asked me a couple of questions. Now, the previous 2 years, I had periodically checked in with a therapist who had gotten nowhere. Every time I talked to her, I just fire hose her with one disaster after another, and she just. But Esada cracked me like an egg in about 2 minutes. She said, "Why are you here?" "I have cancer." "What are you most afraid of?" "That I caused it." And I gave her a brief synopsis of the previous 2 years, and she said, "Well, have you forgiven them?" "Ugh, my therapist keeps asking me that." "No, absolutely not." "You thought about forgiving yourself?" No one had ever asked me that before. Can you do that? Is that a thing? Afterwards, I walked down to the beach and sat on the seawall so I could read. Now, in this book, Louise believes that your thoughts manifest your life experiences. It's what you put out, it's what you get back. It's pretty simple, really. But then she charts out some diseases and the beliefs that she believes are attached to them, like uterine cancer, repressed rage and resentment. Yeah, that checks. Maybe the universe had been listening to me. I used to do this joke in my act like every night. No, it's not that I don't like kids. I do. I'm just praying my uterus falls out. Yeah, thanks, universe. It was a joke. But about that time, this woman came jogging down the sidewalk behind me, and as she passed without breaking stride, she said, "That book changed my life. I hope you find what you're looking for." Thank you. Pretty soon, an elderly gentleman just walked up, and not a creepy guy, a guy from the hood, Montecito. He just said, "What you reading?" I showed him, and He goes, huh, what's wrong with you? I just found out I have cancer and I'm gonna have surgery Tuesday. He goes, oh, girly cancer? Okay, yeah, not something you could get, sure. He goes, oh, that's a shame. You know what you should do? You should take your shoes off and go walking in the water. Well, I'm sure it's freezing, and I'm going to go meet a friend, and, you know, blah, 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 and we kept talking for a few minutes, and then he just abruptly stopped and said, you know, before you leave today, you should make sure you go take your shoes off and go walking in the water. I'm like, okay, crazy man. I'm sure it's cold, and I don't know, we talked about the weather for a few more minutes, and then he just said, well, I hope everything works out for you, and I hope it goes really well. And before you leave today, take off your shoes and go walking in the water. And then he said goodbye and walked away. Now, I swear, I really did think, if I turn around and he's not really there, you know. But he, you know, he was just walking on down the beach. On the way back to the car, I called a friend and told her about it. She said, well, did you do it? And I said, no. She said, you're an idiot. Go back to the beach. Okay. God. It was warm. I let the tide just wash over my toes. And as I could feel that sand pulling away from under my feet, something more than the sand shifted. The movement of that water and the strength of the current, everything just came rising to the surface. And I found myself saying out loud, take it. Take all of it. Take the rage and the resentment and the bitterness. Just take it. As I stood there, I forgave my father for the mess he'd made. And I forgave my brother for most of the torment and cruelty in my life. Not all of it, but most of it. I forgave my mother for leaving us too soon. And I forgave myself for not being the perfect daughter, and for not always being kind and nurturing, and for letting fear and anger run my life. And I chose to let it go. Just let it loose into the ocean. I wonder if that's what that great Pacific garbage patch is made up of. People's fear and anger and disappointment. 2 days later, I checked into surgery. My friend Becky went with me. You know, they ask a lot of questions when you check in, you know. Who's your ride home? Becky. Who's your caretaker? Becky. Who's your beneficiary? Becky. And then Becky just blurted out, you know we're not lesbians, right? And I said, not that I don't find you extremely attractive. We just howled. And this guy wasn't having any of it, which only made it funnier. Then I proceeded to get into an argument with Captain Kangaroo because I asked for the lipo guy. Begged, really. I just said, look, I'm already going to be out. Couldn't you just come in and kind of suck up the rest of it? The captain got mad. He said, I'm trying to save your life. And I said, I'm trying to have a flat stomach. Work with me. Nope, only got the anesthesiologist. A gorgeous man, as I recall. And you know what's weird? This is true. I've learned this. All the good-looking men in hospitals, all anesthesiologists. What a waste that is. Because you see them for such a short time. The next day, you're going to feel a little prick, and boom, they're gone. Pretty much sum up most of my relationships. As I was coming to, I could hear the captain talking to Becky. He said, I don't know what happened the last couple of days, but her tests indicated she was just riddled with cancer. So we took all of her organs out and laid them on the table to check everything out. We found almost nothing. She's going to be absolutely fine. Huh. And now that my uterus was gone, so was all the rage. Because now I no longer had a place to stuff it. Just going to have to deal with it from now on. Plus, physically, I never felt better in my life. Oh my God, I never had to buy another tampon or go through menopause. I'm terribly oversharing now. I'm sorry. It's weird how I can tell a room full of strangers that, but I never told any of it to my dad. He would never have understood. I would just call every other day. Dad, how you doing? Great. Everything is just great. This is it, isn't it? By then I had caller ID, it was Lisa. You're gonna have to get home, Jack's had a heart attack. I flew back to Texas that night and went straight to the hospital. He was already in a coma and he looked like he was gone, but I knew he was in there. Lisa had been with him and told him to wait for me. I know he knew I was there. We talked. Well, you know, I talked. And I'd get little tiny hand squeezes. And then he did the most remarkable thing, just completely unresponsive. And he would suddenly open his eyes, turn, and stare into the upper corner of the room. So Lisa said, who's come to get you? And then we pondered all the possibilities of who might show up to help him transition to the other side. And then Lisa leaned down and very loudly whispered, if it's Jay, don't go. I know those nurses must have thought we were horrible. We were laughing so hard. And I swear, he thought it was funny too. I was able to get a few people to come by. Barry dropped in, and then my dad's best friend, George, who they'd been friends since high school. I called him my Uncle George. He was the fun uncle, you know, the jokester, the prankster, inappropriate in all the right ways. I loved him. I spent a few minutes in the hall catching him up on a lot of things that had been going on, and then we laughed at a couple of stories we told each other our entire lives, and then for some reason, I brought up the pink envelope with the porn. I knew he'd be shocked, but I thought he might be the one person that would think it was funny. Oh yeah, he busted out laughing. He's like, oh yeah, the video porn club. I used to send him that like once a month. Why? Oh, because it really ticked him off. I should have known. You were a good friend. Pretty soon we started discussing our nap schedule, you know. There was a place down the hall you could rest. And it was, you know, you take the first hour, and no, you've been awake the longest, I'll take an hour, and then you come back, and no, I don't mind taking the first shift, let me just take the first. And then I suddenly heard my dad gasp and take his last breath. Like he thought, oh, this has gotten complicated and I've become a problem. I'm just going to go. But I cherished that time with him. I know he could hear me. They say hearing is the last thing to go. And, you know, he was deaf as a post when he was conscious, but I know he heard me. I got to say a lot of things. Said I was sorry I wasn't there for Mom, and I hoped you'd tell her that. I apologized for not being the perfect daughter. And I thanked him for always being there for me. And I was really glad I could be there for him. And he didn't have to worry about a thing. I was going to take care of everything on this side. I would just handle it. And he could go if he wanted to. And so he did. got to see Matt again at the funeral home. Lisa went with me. He began to explain the procedures regarding the drawers in the mausoleum, and then he reminded me that they hadn't been paid for. Is this ever gonna end? And then Lisa said, "Can we go downstairs and kick his ass one more time?" Matt was so serious, and he said, "We don't let you do that anymore." But I had done so well to not get angry. I had come so far. So I just said, "Look, Matt, you know, he's going in a drawer. What do you got? You just got a plain box?" He just looked at me incredulously. I said, "Matt, you know there's no money. And you know these $12,000 caskets never see dirt. That would be ridiculous. And I know you're not going to shove it into a wall. Aren't you taking advantage of the grieving? Because I'm not paying that kind of money for a drawer." Apparently no one had ever challenged him on that. He said, "Well, you could rent a casket for the service, and then the casket is returned, the insides are removed, put into a vault, and then the vault is put into the wall." Huh. Did you know that? You're welcome. I said, "Yeah, put me down for that. Nobody's going to know." Till now. Then he went on to tell me what time the limo would arrive, and I said, "I'm not taking a limo, it's just me, I'll drive myself." He said, "No, we provide a limo." I said, "I'm not taking a limo. These people already think I'm highfalutin from California. I'm not stepping out of a limo alone. That looks sad." He said, "But we give you the limo. I'll drive myself. Don't you have any friends? Why don't you make Lisa and Reba go with you?" "Are we having a fight over this, Matt? This is not no fun." He said, "I will take care of this myself, and you just go along with it." "Fine." So a limo pulled up to Lisa's house. And not a funeral home limo. One that you would take to prom with disco lights. Matt won. Of course, we noticed the bottles were empty, so Lisa tapped on that little window and said, "Hey, why is there no scotch in these bottles? Didn't they tell you it was a turnbow funeral?" And she proceeded to hit on him and ask him what he was doing later. I'm like, "Lisa, reel it in. It's a funeral." By the time we got to the church, I had to tell them both, "Put on a somber face. I'm serious." We got out. I apologized to the driver, and he very quietly said, "Oh, I was warned ahead of time." So we all gathered to say goodbye to Jack. I really thought I had run out of tears. Sitting in that church I'd grown up with and listening to a minister I'd known half my life and seeing the crowd, boy, I had not completely run dry. I wept for all of it. For the 2 years and the loss and the emptiness. And then it was done. And my dad got his place among the elite in a mausoleum right next to Mom, in a drawer. It was all over. Everyone in my family was gone, and I was untethered. Nothing but what life I had left back in California. I walked out of that church knowing, well, a lot of things, really. I knew how to sell properties, I knew how to settle debts, I knew how to file bankruptcy, I knew how to plan a funeral, I knew how to trap a raccoon, and I knew how to go it alone, and I knew how to ask for help, and I had learned how to forgive people, myself included. Someone asked me one time if I thought being untethered meant being lost or free. I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, I'd certainly grown stronger and more confident and more resourceful, but, yeah, when there's no family, you're the only one that can take any pride in that. Oh, and I was also unemployed by then. Yeah, you know, I was just going to have to figure out something new. It made me really grateful for some of the things my dad had taught me growing up. Because, you know, he raised me to do a lot of things on my own. You know, balance a checkbook, change a tire. Not that I'm ever going to do that, but I do know how. stand up for myself in any situation. He taught me to be self-sufficient and a little bit tough. One of those dads who answered all my questions with, "You'll figure it out." And now that the dust had settled, I had come out on the other side, just like the tarot cards had predicted. I was a different person, but I had survived. And I would have to figure it out. I was just going to have to live my life a lot differently. I would no longer hold on to repressed emotions. I would no longer shove anything down. It is all coming out. Sorry. But I would be honest. I would accept personal responsibility, and I would try to focus on positive thoughts, and I would be specific. I'm not going to say things like, "I want my 40th birthday to be memorable," and then find myself having cancer surgery. Now I say I want a party with a cake. And I don't say things like, "How could anything possibly get any worse?" I try to say, "How could anything possibly get any better?" I had to say goodbye to my family of road comics. I had to find a new family that could handle the new me. So every few years, I've moved, just looking for a place to fit in. Then I came here. And I swear it's true, with every move and every new home I've been in, I have been followed by a gaze of raccoons. Those little masked faces hiding their secrets and rubbing those little paws. Stealing my towels out by the hot tub, rearranging the flower beds, and terrorizing my cats. However, according to folklore, their ability to adapt has made them a symbol of survival and resilience in the face of a changing landscape. I love those little bastards. Wait. Don't answer that.